Thank you so much for coming to our webinar today about do-it-yourself versus managed SIEM. Just a couple quick housekeeping items before we get started. You'll notice the questions box on your screen in the GoToWebinars tool. If you have a question during the webinar, please go ahead and type your question in the question pane. We'll have time at the end of the webinar where we will be answering all of those questions. Also, after the webinar, we will be emailing everybody a copy of the recording as well as a copy of all of the slides. The webinar is also going to be available on demand for download on our website. So without further ado, let's get started. So I'd like to introduce Paul Caiazzo. He's the co-founder and chief security architect here at TruShield Security Solutions. Paul brings with him more than 15 years in the information security industry, as well as a master's degree in information security and assurance. As one of the key members of TruShield's business development team, Paul is responsible for developing the corporate strategy and leading the technical products and service development efforts. Paul also has extensive experience in consulting and working with high-level executives at large corporations and governments, advising them on all things cybersecurity related. So take it away, Paul.
Okay, thanks, Robin, and thanks everybody for attending the webinar today. On the screen here, you should see some contact information for me. If you have any questions or you'd like to reach out, feel free to do that either via my LinkedIn profile, via my email, or feel free to reach me via Twitter as well. So with that said, I want to talk to you first about who TruShield is so that you have a better understanding of where we're coming from. And a little bit of a background should also set up how we view the challenge of implementing a SIEM. So we're a global cybersecurity company that's based in the Washington, D.C. area. We have clients all across the world on multiple continents doing this sort of work, doing security information event management, doing security consulting, and all sorts of different stuff. A large portion of our work is in that managed security services realm, which is, again, what we're going to be talking about today. But we've also done quite a lot of security consulting on security architecture, rollouts of SIEMs, and helping our clients understand what tools help them achieve their security goals. So a little bit of agenda for today. We're going to talk about what a SIEM is for anybody that's on the line that has not really familiar with the term or familiar with what they do or how they work. We're going to talk about what all goes into implementing a SIEM in your environment and what some of the challenges and pitfalls are that are associated with that. Additionally, we're going to talk a little bit about what some of the cost influences are in terms of what you need to be planning for if you're going to be implementing your own SIEM. We'll then talk a little bit about the MSSP model, the alternative to implementing it yourself. Effectively the same sorts of things. What goes into an MSSP delivered SIEM, and what are the key differences between that and the do-it-yourself model. At the end, we will have a Q&A session. So again, as Robin mentioned, if you do have questions, feel free to type them into that chat box there, and we'll address them at the end. So with that, what is a SIEM? SIEM is a security information and event management system. It's a tool that's designed to help you achieve situational awareness of things that are going on in your environment in a hopefully real-time basis. The term actually is a combination of security information management and security event management. And the idea behind it, or the design concept, is to bring together security information from multiple different silos and try to draw some actionable intelligence out of that. Put the pieces together to draw kind of a big picture of what's going on your network at any given moment in time. They can be very valuable tools if they're implemented correctly. If they're not, they can unfortunately be a little bit noisier than some other security tools might be. So why do you need a SIEM? I think for me, there are a couple of key factors to consider here. You need one because, first off, it's what's going to enable you to have that big picture perspective. It's going to enable you to pull information out of those silos where data currently exists. So, for instance, your firewall has a wealth of information about what's going on in your network. Your endpoints also have a wealth of information about what's going on them, where the data actually resides. They're siloed right now. You're not able to kind of mash the two together and draw any real information out of them, and the SIEM is really what helps you do that. It drives the ability to identify any compromises that are happening in your environment, and not just whether or not they are happening, but it'll help you nail down what the scope of those compromises are. So if something bad were to happen, in order to really be able to respond to that, you need to know exactly what has happened and on what devices the event has impacted. The SIEM will help you do that, because if you're looking at data streaming off of each one of those devices, you're going to have a better understanding of what devices have been impacted by any specific incident that's happening on the network. So by that, you're going to then be able to direct the response effort much more targeted than you would otherwise. So really driving that containment and eradication strategy in a much more targeted and focused manner really enables you to act with precision. Of course, this all is dependent upon being able to detect a compromise in your environment. And there are some statistics which should highlight why this is so important. The average amount of time it takes for an organization to detect that they have been compromised is up around 7 months. So 210 days is the average across the universe of companies that were polled for this. So what that means is that without some really advanced tools and technologies and the processes that support them, you could have an incident impacting you for 7 months without your knowledge. And that's the kind of thing that we saw very recently with the OPM, or the Office of Personnel Management, hack within the government. That actually occurred last year, and they didn't really know about it until April. And in that period of time, they pulled records for 21 million people, including fingerprints for 1.1 million people, all without anybody even noticing. So that's a key driver of why you need this kind of technology, simply to reduce risk. In addition to that, there are some compliance requirements across pretty much every compliance regulation you can think of. They've got some amount of log monitoring, log retention, log review, and response. So the SIEM is really what will make that doable. It's a very challenging thing to do without having a technology like this, because there's not really an elegant and efficient way to bring logs together without using a SIEM. And so, if you're on the phone and you have any sort of regulatory compliance requirements that deal with log management or log retention, SIEM is a way or a means to that end. There are multiple different kinds of SIEMs. So if you're looking at the purchase of one of these technologies, you're probably seeing a number of different kinds. You've got your traditional enterprise class SIEM, something like an ArcSight, which is a very robust tool, also very expensive and kind of a bear to implement. There's also the SIEMs that are based on log managers. So if you're looking at like a logarithm, that's that kind of tool. Built upon log collection technology with some analytics kind of layered on top of that. There's also the analytics-based tool, so kind of the inverse of that. So a tool that's designed to do security analytics, but has the log collection kind of added in after the fact. RSA has a tool like this, RSA Security Analytics. And lastly, in this kind of SIEM space, you've got the big data tool, a tool that's designed to pull together information from any different number of sources and allow you to construct some analysis based upon that. And I'm thinking of Splunk when I'm talking about that. All of those tools are pretty powerful. They all have kind of their pros and cons. They all have different licensing models as well. So a lot of them are based upon log volume that's going to be pulled into that SIEM. Some of them are going to be based upon endpoints and counts of endpoints that are going to be logged and monitored. The key thing that I want to leave you with on this slide is the pick two and only two. So regardless of what type of SIEM you're looking at, you're going to have a number of different factors to weigh against one another. What I like to say is you can pick two of effective, inexpensive, and easy to use. If it's effective and inexpensive, it's not going to be easy to use. If it's effective and easy to use, it's not going to be cheap. And if it's cheap and easy to use, it's unfortunately not going to be very good. So when you're looking at your decision criteria for purchasing your own SIEM, think about what matters the most for you. If you're extremely budget conscious, then you're probably going to have to give up one or the other. And I guess in that case, for me, I would probably give up easy to use and make sure that it's effective, and then bring in some professional services consulting to help me make sure that it's actually working correctly. So how does it actually work? So the SIEM is a device or set of devices that are installed in your network. There are multiple different models for how that actually can be done. The SIEM can be an appliance that you purchase from the vendor. It's a kind of a standalone tool that is essentially a black box. You drop in and it kind of manages itself with you doing some of the operations and administration for it, things like firmware updates and stuff like that. It can be a virtual appliance, so a similar model but rides upon your virtual infrastructure. Or it could simply be an application that's installed on some server device within your environment. Once there, regardless of the deployment model, it's designed to collect logs. It pulls logs in from nodes in the network, and that can be either via an agent that's installed on those endpoints, or it could be via a syslog or some sort of log forwarding mechanism. But one way or another, that's the critical component here, that those logs from the devices being monitored must be brought into that SIEM device so that the analysis can happen from there. The logs you should be collecting, at a minimum, really need to be all of your security appliances. So your firewalls, your IDS, IPS, any proxies you might have, any unified threat management systems that you might have, doing like email gateways or web content filtration, anything at your network edge that is kind of the gateway to your network. That stuff's a must. Absolutely got to have that in there. Additionally, anything that's in your DMZ that's public-facing, things like your web servers or any other assets that are in your DMZ, really we highly recommend that you log those as well. Any critical servers within the infrastructure, so your Active Directory servers, any database servers that are the where you store your sensitive or your critical information, definitely be logging that stuff. Any high-value endpoints, so even desktops within the environment that are perhaps the workspace for either key administrators that have a lot of high-level access to some critical assets, or maybe even high-value targets. So, for instance, if you're the president of the company or the CEO, there could be very sensitive or valuable information on that endpoint that somebody may be wanting to attack specifically. And that's going to help you identify those advanced persistent threats that are looking to target the user or the endpoint versus trying to come in through the network edge. One way or another, what we recommend really is that you're logging all IP addressable assets. Anything that's on your network has some security relevant information to it, and the SIEM is going to help you kind of cut the noise down and bring it all together in a manner that's going to be meaningful to you and help you generate some actual actionable intelligence out of that. So that means you've got all the logs, you've got them in your centralized SIEM. What do you do with it now? Now the action of normalization, aggregation, and correlation happens. What does all that mean? Normalization simply means making so that devices from different manufacturers doing different things are speaking essentially the same language. So a log that comes from a checkpoint firewall is going to be aggregatable with a log that's coming from like a Windows server, for instance. Get them speaking the same language so that we can do that aggregation and correlation from there. Aggregation just means, so we've identified a piece of traffic that hits your network edge and is bound for some endpoint within the environment. That represents a attack chain or potential attack chain, and each hop along the way is where that aggregation happens. So it's the same event, but we're seeing it across multiple different endpoints in the network as it goes from the network edge down to the endpoint where its destination actually is. All that stuff can be compressed down and aggregated into effectively a single event. From there, the correlation happens. So when we see the events that are happening from, again, the network edge all the way into the destination, we want to be able to pull that together from these multiple different sources so that it's all a manageable piece of information that you can draw from that data that is actually out there that you're sucking in. Once you have all that stuff normalized, aggregated, and correlated, you then want to be doing the threat analysis. So all of that traffic, you've got it in one place. You've got to be able to identify what's an actual threat versus what is just normal traffic, and that's really where the SIEM comes into play. Able to scrub that traffic against threat signature databases, or if you've got a heuristics-based SIEM, being able to do some behavioral analysis against that traffic. Both of those are highly valuable. The threat database is effectively going to enable you to very quickly identify threats that have signatures associated with them. So any sort of the newest malware, let's say some malware that's impacting Adobe Flash that you guys are probably all looking at today based upon the patches that came out a couple days ago. So those are going to have signatures associated with them, and they'll be very quick to identify simply because if a packet or an event log matches a signature, it will generate an instant alert. The behavioral-based stuff, not really going to work like that. It's going to require a baseline of your environments, the types of traffic that are typical on that network over a period of time. Usually we see 60 to 90-day baseline periods where the SIEM is effectively analyzing traffic that's happening on the network and getting a kind of a lay of the land, developing that picture of what's normal and what's abnormal. And from there, any abnormal traffic is what we'll be alerted on. So now that will help identify what's called the zero-day vulnerability or the insider threat vulnerability. Both of those might not have a signature associated with them, but there's some threat information that can be derived from an analysis of historical traffic on the network. And in my opinion, you need both. You've got to be doing the signature-based analysis because it's very quick and it will take a lot of the threat off the table immediately. But also the behavioral-based stuff will help identify maybe some of the slow and low attacks or the insider threats that are going to kind of circumvent your normal traditional controls like your firewalls or your IDS, IPS. So once you've actually done that, you've scrubbed it against that database, you've developed that baseline, you then have to start generating these alerts. Those alerts have to actually be responded to. So who are they actually going to go to? That's dependent upon you to determine. Someone within your IT staff, your IT security staff should be receiving alerts and then acting upon them accordingly. So that acting upon them means they've got to investigate it, they've got to determine whether it's a real threat or perhaps just a false positive. If it's a false positive, that has to be put back through the process so that that rule set gets tuned so that it doesn't continuously generate false positives. And then that individual has to actually go out and do something with the alert. And that is usually where the most work actually is involved. So the first part of all this, though, is configuring and installing the SIEM. And if this isn't done correctly, that last part, the response and the tuning, is very, very difficult to actually achieve. So the thing with the SIEM is that it's a pretty complex piece of technology. There's a lot of different moving parts. You've got the platform itself the SIEM's running on, the SIEM software that has to be kept up to date, maybe the virtual infrastructure that you've actually implemented to support that SIEM, all of the agents out in the environment that are doing the log forwarding, any sort of connection managers if you've got something like ArcSight or Logarithm, the actual threat signatures themselves, keeping that database up to date. And then you've got the concept of importing vulnerability results into the SIEM. So there are some SIEMs out there that do let you import vulnerability scan results. I think that's a highly valuable feature, but it's not supported by all SIEMs, and it's also somewhat complex to get to work correctly. The idea behind it is that if you perform regular vulnerability scans, which I'm guessing all of you do, and if you don't, you really should, you can take that data, import it into your SIEM, and then the traffic alerts could be correlated against the known vulnerabilities in your environment. So what that means is if we know that you've got X vulnerability and we see traffic via the SIEM that is exploitative of that vulnerability on your network, that's a very high criticality alert because that's a likely exploit. And that's the sort of thing that feature could enable. Again, it's got to be done correctly, and if it's done correctly, it can actually be automated, but it's not a trivial thing to implement correctly. With SIEMs, misconfigurations and incomplete rollouts are common. Again, they're complex, and if professional services is not something that's purchased at the time of the tool purchase, then it's incumbent upon you to implement this thing correctly. And I'm sure a lot of you guys and ladies out there have many hats that you're wearing, multiple tasks that you've got to do. Planning and rolling out a SIEM is it's a significant undertaking. And so if there's a lot of stuff on your plate already, this is something you're definitely going to want to have professional services support for. Once you've got the SIEM installed, you've got a bunch of management and administration tasks that you're going to have to do from there on out. Updates and management of the SIEM itself. So what kind of updates am I talking about? You've got software updates for the SIEM. You've got firmware updates if you've got an appliance or perhaps a virtual machine. There's the platform management stuff. So if you've got the application model or the virtual appliance model, you have to be performing operating system updates, SQL Server updates, things like that. There's new device integration, so no environment's perfectly static. There's always going to be new devices coming online or perhaps going offline, and the SIEM has to be nurtured to maintain an accurate perspective of the environment. That's an ongoing task. If you have any sort of new dashboards or new analyses that you want to do, you've got to create those. And that, that there's a lot of value to be had there, but that's a task that has to be planned for at the beginning and something that you've got to be constantly doing. Then you've, of course, got the rule set updates. So if you want to do anything unique to your environment and identify perhaps traffic that's either bound to or stemming from a sensitive database or something like that, you've got to create those rules. And then, of course, you've got to tune them. Rules can be unwieldy at times and can generate a lot of false positives if you're not doing it correctly. And that's a kind of this constant feedback loop of improvement with the SIEM that you've got to continue to do from the moment of implementation perpetually from there on out. That tuning cannot be undersold. It's something that's extremely important to continue to do. So once you've got that tuning in place, the thing is, the work doesn't stop there. You've got this thing implemented. You've got a significant amount of capital investment in actually getting it rolled out. You've got all of your devices sending logs to it, but you actually have to respond to and monitor these alerts on an ongoing basis. And that, again, is not a trivial thing to plan for. The costs that are associated with this, they really do depend upon your environment size, and they depend upon some specifics of how your business operates. If you have a very heavy web presence that has a lot of traffic in and out of your environment, this is probably going to be more costly simply because if it's a traffic-based license model and you have a high traffic environment, your license costs are going to go up. If it's a device-based license model, then your license costs will scale at the size of your environment. The average that we saw for your enterprise class SIM, so I'm thinking again of that ARC site here, is around $50,000 for a mid-sized organization and can scale up very, very quickly depending upon the size of your environment. Your license maintenance cost for out years is usually going to be 20%. If you have a large environment, you may be able to negotiate a lower maintenance cost for your licensing, but it's still an out-year cost that you've got to definitely be planning for. You've also got the hardware cost. So you remember earlier I mentioned the different deployment models. You've got appliance-based, you've got application-based, and you've got virtual appliance. If you're performing the application-based or virtual appliance-based, then you've got hardware and software that you have to be concerned about from a budgetary perspective. And that is, again, not an insignificant sum of money. With an enterprise class SIM, you typically need to have the enterprise class operating systems and the enterprise class database backends. Those licenses can be very expensive. And again, that doesn't even include things like storage requirements. There is usually very high storage requirements for a SIM, especially if you've got any sort of significant log retention requirements in your regulations. You could have to keep logs for a year, sometimes 7 years. And that can be a huge amount of storage that you have to plan for. So you should think about that, and also think about the fact that this has to, in order for it to work correctly, has to be near real time. So we're talking fiber channel SANs. You can't really do iSCSI. They're not generally even supported by a lot of these enterprise class SIMs. And you've got a very high computational requirement and a RAM-hungry device that is actually performing the analysis, correlation, and aggregation. Usually a high horsepower device to do this. So make sure you're planning for that when you're looking at the cost of a do-it-yourself SIM. You also, of course, have the installation and configuration costs. So even if you're going to do it yourself, there's some amount of your time that has to be spent in architecting this and rolling it out. And then again, I mentioned earlier, there's some common pitfalls that you could definitely fall into if it's not done correctly. We do recommend obtaining professional services or consulting if you're going to do a SIM yourself. And that's a cost you've got to plan for. The vast majority of the time, the SIM vendor is able to provide the professional services for you, but of course they're going to charge you for it. So plan for that as well. And then, once it's installed, the management, administration, monitoring, and response are the key factors. You're going to not be able to realize the return on the investment if you're not doing this stuff correctly. Management and administration is, something that perhaps your sysadmins can handle, but that's, if they're already stretched thin managing servers across your environment or managing, your web presence or your network infrastructure, this is an additional task that could be very burdensome upon them and certainly time-consuming. The monitoring and response is, I think, the key aspect of this. Many companies waste a ton of money by purchasing a SIM but not adequately planning for monitoring and response. Being able to detect a compromise or being able to detect an incident in your network really doesn't provide you a lot of value if you're not able to respond to it. If you're not able to contain and eradicate that in a timely fashion, then it's kind of all for naught. So certainly plan for significant burden to time and resources of your existing staff to handle monitoring and response. If you're looking at this as a one person who's multitasked doing monitoring response, unfortunately that's probably going to fall short of the need. Generally, this is one of those areas that is going to be viewed as a kind of a burdensome or cumbersome task for that individual that's kind of multitasked, and it's not going to get the attention it requires. If you're looking for 24/7 support, that's generally not really achievable for an organization that hasn't done 24/7 before. There are significant logistics that go into implementing a 24/7 scenario, and not just from a personnel perspective, but also facility perspective. Many facilities aren't even really set up to be able to support a 24/7 operation. Unfortunately, even though most of us aren't really ready for 24/7, the bad guys are. The bad guys are not working on that traditional 9-to-5 paradigm. They're either in a totally different time zone on the opposite side of the world, and 9 to 5 to them is the middle of the night for us, or they've got significant resources and are able to continue running scripts or automated attacks 24 hours a day. And if you're not watching 24 hours a day, that one event out of those 100,000 is the one that's going to pop you, and unfortunately, they only have to get it right once, and we've got to get it right 100% of the time. By the numbers, if you want to do 24/7, you need to be planning for at least 6 FTE. The actual number is 5.4, so if you have somebody that could be that 0.4, then perhaps that works, but generally we recommend planning for 6 people to actually be able to do 24/7 monitoring and response. So again, not an insignificant cost. We really do recommend that that is tightly coupled to a well-defined incident response plan, that these individuals who are performing response know exactly what they need to do. That's been tested, and it's something that's scenario-based. So when a specific type of incident occurs, they know exactly what they need to do, and they're able to respond to it effectively. Also, it's kind of a specific skill set to do monitoring and response. So watching IDS logs is not something that every systems administrator is really even prepared or able to do. Requires some specific training, certainly training within the SIEM itself. So definitely plan for that as an expense as well. So that is the basics of the SIEM, the do-it-yourself side. So how does this look if it's a managed operation? A lot of it is effectively the same, except the burden of doing all of this heavy lifting is kind of lifted off of you. So the diagram that you're seeing on your screen right now, I'm going to explain starting from the bottom right. So the right side of the screen is the client environment where you've got monitored devices, applications, databases, etc. These are the things that you're logging in your traditional do-it-yourself SIEM that are being sucked into that SIEM device, and you're doing the monitoring response from. The types of devices that are going to be logged are exactly the same. There's no difference there. You're going to want to look at all of those same sets of devices. All that information is still relevant to the security mission, and there's no difference from what sort of devices are logged. The key difference is that the device, the SIEM device itself, is not something that you're going to have to exhaust administration or management resources to actually maintain. That would be handled by your MSSP. That normalization, the aggregation, the correlation all still happens at that device itself. There are a couple differences there. We're typically depending upon the MSSP. Either that's done entirely at that on-premise device, or there's some compression done there. It's shipped off to an analysis engine at your MSSP, and then the heavy lifting is done there. That's how we do it. We find that to be more effective because the investment in our centralized infrastructure makes it so that device, which is installed on our client site, is a lot lower horsepower device. There's not a significant power need or rack space need or storage need at that device. It's all done at the centralized data center. That information gets transmitted to your MSSP via the public internet. So that's got to be done securely. It should be a FIPS 140-2 encrypted channel. Usually a point-to-point VPN is how that's done. And once those logs get to your MSSP, that's where the correlation, aggregation, normalization happens, and the alerts are generated to be presented to the analysts and engineers that your MSSP has. So those individuals are tasked with 24/7 monitoring and response. They're the ones that are looking at the real-time event log streaming from your networks and are skilled and trained and able to identify threats when they happen and also prepared to respond to them. So they're the individuals that are going to be picking up the phone and calling you guys in the middle of the night to let you know that something has happened in your network and it requires a specific response. Or in some cases, they're the ones that are going to actually be taking action on your behalf to perform some preventative action on your devices. So they also are responsible for doing all that false positive analysis, the investigation into the incidents against historical events that have happened on the client networks, and they're going to be the ones that are maintaining the threat databases as well. So how we do that, for instance, we have a threat database that brings in information from the entire set of clients that we monitor, and that's how really the best MSSPs should do it. So if you're looking at an MSSP, they should be able to draw big data analysis and threat intelligence from their entire pool of clients and help protect each individual client by virtue of that pool of information they've got available to them. From there, they're able to do that targeted containment, eradication, and response. So they're able to tell you exactly what devices need to be responded to, what devices need to have their, some malware removed from them, or what IP block needs to be put in place at your firewall to prevent some botnet command and control node from actually talking to the compromised device. The MSSP really brings the value to the table by being able to give you that targeted, focused, and precise remediation information. And that's where that happens. So the other thing is the MSSP should enable you to review your dashboards, the same things that the analysts and responders are looking at, so that if you have to present information to an auditor, for instance, you've got an interface that you can do that via. And that will help you demonstrate compliance with your regulations. It'll also help you demonstrate that you've got somebody actively watching your security. And that should help also appease your perhaps board of directors or your senior management that are watching headlines and seeing these bad things happen out in the world and asking you, what are we doing about this? That should help you, a couple of arrows in your quiver to help have those conversations. So what are the key functional differences between the do-it-yourself model and the MSSP? So the MSSP, that initial architecture and rollout are handled by people who've done it many, many times. It's not a burden upon you or your staff to actually architect this in a manner that's going to be effective. That's something that the MSSP should do. That's usually included in the rollout cost from the MSSP. And then, of course, they manage the day-to-day operations. So all of that SIEM management we talked about earlier with the upkeep of things like versions or operating systems or firmware updates, things like that, that's all handled by the MSSP from there. Agent deployment and agent upkeep is also something that should be handled by the MSSP. So as new devices come into your environment, you should have an open and engaged relationship with your MSSP wherein you advise them that new devices are coming online, and they handle the actual heavy lifting of deploying those agents to those devices, making sure the logs are incorporated the way that they need to be, and performing kind of a health check on a regular basis to ensure that there's no rogue devices or there's no devices that have kind of gone missing or fallen off the radar without somebody noticing it. That should actually generate an alert. And if your SIEM or if your MSSP is not able to do that, then I would raise some questions with them. They also do the 24/7 monitoring, alerting, and instant response. Of course, that's the real value that you're trying to get out of your managed security services provider. You want to know that somebody's watching your back 24 hours a day and on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that's really where they come into play. They're going to be doing all that incident investigation and false positive analysis, and that's where that dedicated team of professionals comes into play. Your MSSP really should be able to demonstrate via things like experience or certifications from their staff that they actually have a staff that's capable of doing this, that they've got experience having had done it in many environments like yours, in industries like yours or within your industry specifically. They know exactly how to respond to incidents when they happen. They should also be very tightly engaged with you. We like to call this the difference between a managed security services partner and a managed security services provider. The partner is going to be the type of organization that is actively integrated with you, is meeting with you on a frequent basis and understands your pains and your challenges, and also is working with you to kind of shape your security program by virtue of the stuff that they're learning by monitoring you. So they should be able to see things like inappropriate ports open to the internet, for instance, and could potentially advise you on some policy updates for things like if social media attacks were happening on a regular basis, then your MSSP should probably be saying, hey, update your policy so that things like Facebook during the day are not really allowed or even technically feasible via some security controls that are recommended. That's the kind of approach that you really should be looking for out of your MSSP. And that goes a little bit above and beyond that minimum check-the-box compliance goal. The goal should not really be minimum compliance. The goal should be security. And security and risk management are a little bit different animals than minimum compliance. And that dedicated team of professionals should be able to help you do that. They're going to also be the guys that are working on solutions development. So when a new threat is seen, so when a new vulnerability is discovered, they're going to be the ones that are thinking about your environment and what they know about it and helping architect solutions that are meaningful to you, that are practical to actually implement in your environment specifically, and then giving you very targeted guidance on how to perform that remediating action, how to perform that preventative action to hopefully take the risks off the table before they become incidents for you. That's also where that threat analytics comes into play, so that incidents that are impacting client A don't impact you, client Z, and B through Y either. They're also, they shouldn't have on staff certified forensic investigators. Unfortunately, as a security professional, I think everybody on the phone probably realizes that compromises, unfortunately, are an inevitability. So when they actually do occur, you've got to have the ability to quickly contain them and eradicate them. You also need to know exactly what happened that caused that incident. And that root cause analysis is where that forensic investigator comes into play. The forensic investigator could also help you with any sort of prosecution that you may need to undertake if, like, for instance, you have an insider threat that has compromised some sensitive information. There's probably some prosecutorial sort of actions that you're going to want to take based upon that. The forensic investigator that your MSSP should be able to bring to the table can help you handle things like chain of custody for evidence, forensic imaging of devices that have been compromised, things like that, that are not going to be in the bailiwick of your typical systems administrator. A lot of intricacies there that could create significant problems if prosecution is something that you're looking to do or you might want to do based on some incident. If those sorts of steps aren't done correctly, pretty much none of that evidence will be allowed in court. So a lot of things that the MSSP is going to bring to the table that you're either going to have to do yourself or handle via some other mechanism or just not do. And neither of those are things that we want to see happen. So what are some other differences? The threat intelligence, I think, is another thing that is a significant benefit to working with an MSSP versus a do-it-yourself SIM. Threat intelligence helps you extend your perspective far beyond the boundaries of your network. So you can learn things about the global trends and patterns within the cybersecurity industry, within the attack community, and that information can help you prevent attacks from actually being successful against you. That's what your MSSP really should be doing for you. They're the ones that should be doing that research across not only their pool of clients, but also the industry at large by monitoring things like threat communication channels or participating in some of the global working groups or threat information exchanges, so that, again, threats that are impacting other organizations, they should be advising you of how to take preventative action so that they don't impact you. Or if they are potentially impactful to you, what sort of countermeasures could you put in place to mitigate the effect of that if it were to actually happen? We do perform threat intelligence for our clients. We actually publish monthly threat intelligence reports. There's a link on the screen there where you can go and download some of those. That's an area that we're heavily focused on in terms of being able to produce information that's valuable to not only our clients but the public at large. I personally feel like the more good work that can be done to help the community at large, whether or not they're a client of ours, is beneficial to us as an industry. And so I look at it as the high tide that rises all ships. And that's something you're free to go and download today if you're interested in that. Additionally, for our clients, we do threat alerting and advisories. So when a new vulnerability is identified, or perhaps we discover one by virtue of our own research, We publish alerts and advisories to our clients with recommended mitigation strategies. And those are the sorts of things that your MSSP should be doing for you. They should be able to produce that sort of targeted alert information that will help you prepare for perhaps an impending attack or implement the right controls so that they don't actually impact you. They should also include the mitigation strategies within them. So knowing that a vulnerability is out there really is only a part of the equation. You got to know what to do when that actually is exploited or how to prevent it from being exploited. So we talked earlier about the costs of a do-it-yourself SIM. So how do we compare that to the cost of an MSSP? So if you remember, we talked about a log volume-based cost for a do-it-yourself SIM. Your typical MSSP is not going to really work like that. It will be a per device subscription fee. That device subscription is it's going to be based upon a couple of things. Usually it's based upon device categories. Those categories are going to include things like log volume and relevance to the security mission. So for instance, an endpoint like the laptop you're looking at right now is going to be priced at a different level than like an edge firewall or high volume IDS IPS. Simply because the types of traffic there or the types of logs that are going to be incorporated from those devices are going to be more meaningful to the security mission. All of them are still going to be meaningful to one level or another, but the firewall type of logs are going to be something that will kind of power the whole correlation and threat alerting function. So what they're going to be doing for that monthly subscription fee is all that 24/7 monitoring, alerting, that client engagement, all of the stuff that I talked about earlier. Usually that monthly subscription fee does include some response or remediation hours. In some cases it doesn't. It depends upon what you've purchased from your MSSP. A lot of times they'll do that on a strictly time and materials basis, especially if you're trying to drive your monthly subscription fee down to the bottom number. And that can work well. It depends upon what sort of environment you've got and how often you're seeing incidents happen. So if you've got a very well locked down environment with a lot of the key security architecture components that we would recommend you have, like network segmentation and good access controls built into all the different layers of your network, then perhaps the time and materials approach might work for you. The best MSSPs will do rollover hours. So if you have a bucket of hours for response or remediation, that would get rolled over from month to month. What we do is at the end of the engagement period, we'll have a convertible sort of approach where if hours have not been used for response or remediation, they'll be convertible to some other service, whether that's security awareness training or perhaps a penetration test, depending upon what the client actually needs. So that should all be included in that monthly subscription fee. Typically, there's going to be options for service enhancements above and beyond that. Those options should include things like an active appliance management. So your MSSP, again, they've got highly skilled, highly trained people. They can do all of that firewall management, the IDS, IPS management for you. So if you wanted to have a security operations or security in a box, effectively, your MSSP should be able to do that for you. They also should be able to do managed vulnerability scanning. And the idea there being that device that's on your network, that's going to have to be configured to ingest logs from every endpoint on your network. That right there gives you a communications channel from which you can do things like vulnerability scanning for all those devices in your network. So an optional add-on typically you're going to see with the MSSP is the monthly vulnerability scans. That's also going to help make the SIM process more effective. If you recall earlier, I mentioned about importation of vulnerability results into the SIM. That monthly process can help power that and make it really effective, and again, to help you identify really high criticality incidents so that you can respond to them quickly and efficiently. It also, that device that has that access to every endpoint in your network, it can be the point of entry for patch management. So if you're looking at centralized patch management as something that you want to be able to do and you can't do it today, your MSSP may be able to do that for you. Also endpoint protection. Again, so if you've got access to and are logging all of your endpoints, endpoint protection is not a big jump from there. Things like your antivirus and anti-malware, signature updates, agent rollouts, things like that, laptop encryption, USB device control, data loss prevention, etc. There's a whole gamut of functions and capabilities that your MSSP can bring to the table. And if you're looking for that sort of thing, those are the questions that should help you weed out the best MSSPs from those who are merely good. So what's our recommendation at the end of the day? I think that this is an area that you should probably be a little introspective and realistic about what resources that you have available to you. If you can ask yourself these questions and come away with an honest answer, then you should be able to answer the following question. So do you really have the resources to buy a SIM, considering all of those additional costs that we talked about, your infrastructure costs, your deployment costs, the software, the hardware, the management and administration? If no, then think about a SIM, or think about an MSSP. Do you have the resources to adequately manage and tune that SIM? So that ongoing tuning process, do you have somebody that you can dedicate to doing that has the skills and the training to actually perform that? Do you have a sufficiently skilled staff to actually do the monitoring, investigation, and response? And that's, again, something that you probably can't really do from a single-person multitask perspective. At least it's not going to be as effective as what the investment you're going to put into SIM really requires. Do you have a sufficiently skilled staff that's able to respond to incidents when they actually occur? Are they capable of doing forensic investigations? Can they devise containment and eradication strategies? Are they able to do that on a 24/7, 365 paradigm? Is there a capability to do that every minute of every hour of every day? So if the answer is no to any of the above, then we would highly recommend you consider an MSSP. If you can answer yes to all of those, then you perhaps are an organization that is a good fit for a SIM. And I think that, to me, is the delineation point. If you're capable of doing all this stuff yourself in a 24/7 paradigm, then that kind of obviates the need for an MSSP. There's still going to be some pros to working with an MSSP, simply, again, by extending the scope of your perspective beyond your boundaries to the world at large. That could still be a benefit for you. But if you're able to answer yes to all of these, then I would say consider a do-it-yourself SIM in addition to considering an MSSP. Again, the key benefits that you're going to realize by working with an MSSP are significantly reduced costs to get to that advanced threat detection capability. The best SIMs, again, are extremely expensive, very cumbersome tools that are difficult to implement correctly, difficult to nurture and keep up to date. The MSSP can help you overcome that hurdle, probably a lot less expensive than doing it yourself. Certainly from that 24/7 monitoring, alerting, and response perspective, the MSSP should be able to do that much more cost effectively than what you can do it yourself, simply because they're going to be applying some economies of scale to your environment, and you're not going to be paying effectively for 6 FTE to get that 24/7 support, but you're going to have, in most cases, much more than 6 FTE actually watching. That is a team of certified experts as well. So if you're doing the mental math of what it would take to actually hire, train, and retain 6 staff, think about the certifications those types of individuals are typically going to have, and then think about what those typically cost in your area. Generally not inexpensive people. The other benefit is that actionable intelligence based upon real events occurring on your network in real time. Having somebody that's able to look at and identify containment and mitigation strategies based upon things that they've seen before, based upon practical experience, that's a game changer for many organizations, and that's going to help you drill down that time to detect and time to contain and respond to the bare minimum, and that's really what you want to be driving towards. Again, I mentioned that global perspective on threat patterns. That will immediately reduce the risks that are going to be potentially successful against you. Being able to know what's happening in the industry at large and apply that to countermeasures and security controls on your network edge or on your endpoints is going to be a big win for you. That is a hard thing to do if you've got to do this yourself. If you've got to manage that between all of your other tasks, then a lot of times this is what slips through the cracks. Because there are more important operational focuses that you have to have or your staff have to have just to keep the wheels turning on your IT environment. Again, this is an area that is often overlooked or not enough attention is paid to really realize the return on investment from the significant investment in a SIM. And that really is what allows you to focus on your core mission. The MSSP should take all of the heavy lifting of your ongoing real-time security monitoring and administration off of your hands so that you can focus on the operations of your business. Put the right technologies in place to enable perhaps new business or new efficiencies within your existing processes. That's the key benefit, I think, of working with an MSSP. Take this significant challenge of security operations off of your hands and allow you to do the things that you need to do to make your business function adequately and efficiently. So with that, we're going to open up the floor to some questions. We did have a couple come in through the chat window, mainly around, looks like, okay, so the questions are, if you have your own SIM, you've already invested in and implemented a SIM, can you still realize some benefits from working with an MSSP? The answer to that is yes, and in fact we do have clients today who we manage the SIM that they've purchased. The benefits I think there are that the best MSSPs are going to allow you to access that threat intelligence data across their entire pool, even if you're not using their platform. And additionally, all of that management administration burden benefit that you're going to get from an MSSP should be effectively the same whether or not you're using their platform or your own. The downsides to that are if you've put that investment into a SIM, you've already sunk some capital expenditure into that, and you're still going to have that operational expenditure via the MSSP to actually realize the benefit of that. So there are some pros and cons there, but certainly some benefits as well. There was also a question about, can a SIM help me identify a phishing attack? So I think we've all seen a lot of the most recent successful attacks center around a phishing attack vector, wherein a user receives a malicious email, they click a link, takes them to a malicious website, which then drops some malware payload onto that endpoint. So a SIM and an MSSP definitely can help you identify that, and here's how. So it's entirely dependent upon you capturing logs from those devices, and it will enable you to identify the beacon. So when that malware is dropped onto the network or dropped onto that endpoint, most of the times what I see are either Trojans or botnets that are communicating out to some command and control node or to some malicious IP address. And the MSSP should maintain a list of IP addresses which are malicious, that are where those botnet command and control nodes are. So when that sort of traffic is seen on the network, that generates a high criticality alert, and that will have an origination point that identifies the endpoint within your environment from where that traffic is coming, and that will then advise the containment strategy for responding to that specific instance. So yeah, the actual phishing attack itself may still be successful. That user may still click that link, and that device may still be compromised. The difference is you'll be able to identify that in a very rapid period of time and be able to respond to and contain it much more quickly than what you could do without it. So I guess there are two key components. First off, train your users. Make sure that they're not going to be susceptible to phishing attacks. Implement some technical controls to prevent that sort of thing from happening. There are technologies out there which can sandbox emails so that if a user does click a link, it doesn't take them to that malicious site. It takes them to a sandbox site that doesn't have that malicious code built into it. Technologies exist to help prevent that sort of thing, but it all comes down to training the users and making sure they're less susceptible to that sort of attack. Being able to identify it after the fact is, of course, extremely important, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure in those cases. And you do still have to be able to detect, contain, and eradicate it when it does happen. Let's see, do we have any other questions here? Let's see. Okay, we've got a question about how are forensic investigators certified, SANS, JIAC, etc. We have a variety, so we do have some JIAC certified incident handlers and some SANS certified licensed penetration testers and guys like that. The MSSP should be able to produce a listing of certifications that the SOC analysts have. For our guys, we put them through a rigorous SOC training program at the time of hire. They also typically bring with them several years of experience and some education and certifications to the table. We do have some minimum certification requirements that they must maintain, and we have an ongoing certification process. But the ones that we see that relate specifically to forensics are the certified incident handler, and there's a GIAC certified forensic investigator that a few of our guys do have. Good question, though, and you should be asking your MSSP what certs their analysts have. That should also help you identify which MSSPs are investing in their staff and which are simply hiring help desk or tier 3 technicians to staff their security operations center. Big difference in the type of skill set you're going to find between a help desk sysadmin type support personnel and a security operations center analyst or incident handler. And those are definitely questions you want to ask. It's a good question. Let's see, any other questions out here? Okay, so I don't see any other questions. So I guess I would first off like to thank everybody for attending today. If you do have questions that you'd like to ask after the fact, of course, feel free to reach out to me on the email or on LinkedIn that was previously displayed. This webinar itself will be available for download on our website. If you'd like to review it later on, you're certainly welcome to do that. If you'd like a copy of these slides, that should be available as well for download. And you can either work with either myself or Robin, who introduced herself at the beginning, to obtain a copy of that. Otherwise, again, we hope you found this informative and informational to you as you make your decisions with respect to how to move forward implementing this sort of capability within your environment. There's a whole lot of useful information that can help inform that decision at our website via things like threat advisors and things like that. So please feel free to visit that, download what we've got, subscribe to our threat advisory lists so that you receive those whether or not you're our customer. They'll help you implement the right countermeasures in your environment to protect yourselves from here on out. And of course, we'd have loved the opportunity to work with you guys on a managed services provider perspective. Or additionally, if you've got a SIEM that you need managed or want some help implementing it, we can help there as well. So again, thank you for your time today, and I hope you guys have an enjoyable rest of your day.